Zoro right now is incredibly powerful, but yet he still has a lot more room to grow. And now that we've entered the final saga of One Piece, that means some of the Straw Hats' dreams are about to be achieved, and I'm willing to bet Zoro will be one of the first. It's been evident through Zoro as well as the story itself that he'll probably become the world's strongest swordsman before Luffy becomes the Pirate King. He even says that he wishes to become the world's strongest in order for Luffy to achieve his dream. Even Mihawk says for to be the Pirate King is a lot more difficult than to surpass even him, which means potentially Zoro will be fighting Mihawk a lot sooner rather than later. Just how much more stronger will Zoro need to become in order to achieve his goal? Luckily for us, we actually have a clear view on what Zoro needs to do in order to become the world's strongest swordsman. So today we're going to discuss just how strong Zoro will become by the end of the series, his final bounty, what he needs to do to become the world's strongest swordsman, as well as his path to becoming the strongest right-hand man in pirate history. I think by the end of the series we can all agree that Zoro will be one of the strongest characters to ever exist, surpassing legends and monsters, people like Fujitora, Mihawk, even red-haired Shanks and Roger. Put down the pitchforks and the keyboards, I'm just talking about swordsmanship. We know eventually the Straw Hats will surpass crews like the Rocks and the Roger Pirates, the best crews to ever exist, and to have the world's strongest swordsman as your right-hand man sounds like a pretty good deal. Through his fierce loyalty towards Luffy and his devotion to becoming the strongest, not only will he surpass Mihawk, but also Silver's Rayleigh, the right hand of Roger. Heck, I'd argue by the end of the series, Zoro will definitely be an Emperor level threat, someone that could probably beat KAIDO. The last time they fought, he permanently scarred him. Next time, he might put him 6 feet underground.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
But Zoro right now is pretty damn strong. Someone that is able to scar Kaido permanently. The only person to be able to do so was Kozuki Oden 20 plus years ago, and he soundly defeated King while also unlocking advanced conqueror's haki. Only a select few are able to use this, and they are considered one of the strongest, and Zoro is already well on his way to do that. But yet, he's still not ready for Mihawk, I'd argue, and he still has a long ways to go in order to become the strongest swordsman. But as I mentioned earlier, we have a clear path on what Zoro needs to do in order to become the strongest. He needs to master Enma as well as get himself a black blade, and thus would allow him to raise its rank and potentially get himself a saijo or wazamono. Something most fans believe Zoro will get by the end of the series, as a lot of the greats have a saijo wazamono, Whitebeard, Roger, and of course Mihawk, but more on that a little later. But once Zoro is able to get a black blade, not only would he be able to do something Oden wasn't able to do himself, but he also surpass him. This is the same guy that was able to go toe-to-toe with Kaido and almost decapitate him 20 years ago. That's an insane amount of power that Zoro will get, but I don't think Enma will be the only black blade that Zoro has, as I believe he'll turn all of his swords into black blades, with Wado Ichimonji probably being the first, as that's the one he had the longest, but it doesn't really matter because Enma and Wado Ichimonji are actually sister swords because they were made by Kozaburo. But how does one even gain a black blade? Unfortunately, we do not know the answer, but it's been hinted that it has something to do with haki, as stated by Mihawk, but also in the Road to Laugh Tale, it was stated that there might be more than just haki needed in order to get a black blade. So maybe it's more of a personal journey and connection with your sword. When it comes to awakening your devil fruit, your mind and body end up becoming one or catching up with your fruit's power. So maybe it's the same with your sword, where the sword power has to become one with the user. It sounds a little weird, but clearly Zoro and Enma are not on the same page yet, and Enma's trying to force Zoro into mastering him. Even though it likes him, it's still making him go through a difficult path. Maybe Enma is the key for us to understanding what it means to have a black blade, because it clearly shows that this sword has a personality of its own. So maybe once Zoro and his blades become one and the same, that is when he's able to achieve a black blade. Again, it sounds weird, but at this point we don't know the answers. And speaking of blades, a lot of fans believe Zoro will eventually get a saijo wazamono, one of the 12 greatest swords in all of One Piece. And I love the idea of him replacing his sandai with the nidai. I don't know what happened with that plot line, but I also love the idea of Zoro bringing the weakest of the 3 blades, the sandai, with him to the very top and making it one of the legendary most powerful swords in all of history. I really like that idea. It's really poetic in a way. But a lot of people speculate that Zoro will get his hands on the first generation of the Kitetsu, the Shodai Kitetsu. We don't know its whereabouts, but a lot of people theorize that the bald gorosei, he has a name now, I keep forgetting. Ethan Barron has that blade because it looks similar to the other Kitetsu, but we'll talk more on him a little later because he is an opponent that Zoro might fight beyond Mihawk. But speaking of Mihawk, because of the bounties, we're able to understand the pecking order for Zoro to go through in order to become the world's strongest. Mihawk has a bounty of 3,596,000,000, where an admiral now has a bounty of 3 billion. So that basically says that Mihawk is worth or much more of a threat than an admiral, which to me makes a lot more sense. He's the world's strongest swordsman. Only 3 characters in the entire series have the title of world's strongest: Kaido, Mihawk, and Whitebeard. So I'm willing to bet that the day that Zoro gets himself a black blade, as well as show the power to surpass or even defeat an admiral, will be the moment he is ready to fight Mihawk. But before Zoro even fights an admiral, there's someone else in his path, and his name is Shiryu of the Rain. We all know the Strats will be fighting the Blackbeard Pirates eventually, each of them probably getting their own one-on-one fight, and I'm pretty certain that Zoro will be fighting Shiryu, as he is the purebred swordsman of the crew. In fact, he loves and cares for swords just as much as Zoro does, with the main difference being that Shiryu is dirty and he's nasty. He is willing to cheat and do anything in order to achieve his goal and take the kill. He was said to be on par with Magellan 2 years ago, but he's definitely gotten stronger since, even gaining a pretty helpful power, the invisibility fruit. This will definitely be Zoro's most challenging, difficult, and brutal fight in the series once we get to it. And he'll definitely get another power up through this fight as well, specifically observation haki. This is something I'd argue Zoro has been lacking throughout this series. His armament is great, his conquerors is great, but his observation we haven't seen much of, and because he's fighting an invisible opponent, he's definitely going to have to use it to its utmost potential, unlocking new levels such as future sight, or maybe other abilities we have yet to see. Maybe fusing observation with conquerors. That is something we have yet to see and I think would be really dope. We know Shanks is known as the observation killer, so maybe this is an ability that Zoro could gain as well, but his main goal, Mihawk, is known as Hawkeye, and I'm willing to bet that this guy has one of the best observation haki in the entire series. I gotta assume that Shiryu, through his ability as well as haki, is able to hide his presence completely, so Zoro's gonna really have to tap into a next level of power. But even then, Zoro still might not be enough to fight Mihawk. It will be only at the moment Zoro surpasses Shanks in swordsmanship is when I think he'll be ready to fight Hawkeye. We already know Mihawk is a better swordsman than Shanks, and a lot of people believe that Mihawk is an Emperor level character, which is why I believe when Zoro defeats Mihawk, he'll also become an Emperor level character, which is why his potential is extremely scary. Mihawk has been waiting all these years for someone to step up to the plate on the level of Shanks, and Zoro is definitely the guy that'll be able to live up to the task. Not saying he'll be stronger than Shanks, just simply he'll be a better swordsman and probably even learn or copy some techniques that the red hair wonder can also do. But Mihawk could casually swing his blade and cut down a tsunami that's bigger than Marineford, and that's the level of power that Zoro needs to attain by the end of the series. But how do we even get Zoro versus Mihawk? Well, that's also a path that's kinda clear now, as Mihawk is now a part of the Cross Guild, one of the 4 emperors, and is a part of Buggy's crew, and Buggy has just declared he wants to become Pirate King and get the One Piece, which puts him in direct opposition with the Straw Hat Pirates, which means in order for Luffy to become Pirate King, they're gonna have to cross paths with the Cross Guild, and thus Zoro versus Mihawk can finally happen. The amount of power that Zoro will have by the time of this fight is going to be insane. He's going to be a master swordsman that can cut through anything and everything, even a substance that Mihawk isn't capable of cutting as far as we can tell. Diamond. It's been hinted that Zoro might be able to cut Diamond in the future at the end of his fight with Mr. One. Mr. One says, "What are you gonna do next? You're gonna cut Diamond?" And Zoro's like, "Don't be ridiculous." Only to turn out that Jozu had a diamond fruit. We have no idea where Jozu is now, but Mihawk did a slash towards Whitebeard and he wasn't able to cut through Jozu, although he wasn't aiming to cut through Diamond. As of right now, we're not sure if Mihawk is able to do it, but it's possible that eventually Zoro will. The scariest part of Zoro is his potential and what he can truly achieve through his tenacity. The fact that we haven't even seen him at his absolute peak, and I mean King of Hell mode plus his Ashura form, I'm actually scared of what he could do. Although little is known about Mihawk, it seems these two have a little parallel of their own going on. Mihawk was known as the Marine Hunter, while Zoro was known as the Pirate Hunter. Although they went through similar paths, they went through it completely different. Mihawk was always known as a loner. When you're at the very top, you're always alone, whereas Zoro actually values friendship and companions and uses that in order to achieve his goals as well. These guys are completely different, and you can see that through the time skip when Zoro asked Mihawk to train him. Mihawk was disgusted. Throwing your pride away for someone else, I would never do that. That's preposterous. I came to the top by myself and I stayed at the top by myself. There's a reason why Mihawk was never known to have a crew. When these two eventually clash, it won't just be challenging for the title of the world's strongest, but also their philosophies. But once he defeats Mihawk, not only will he become the world's strongest swordsman, but also a master at all 3 types of haki, gain himself a black blade, a saijo wazamono, definitely cementing him in pirate history, becoming not only one of the strongest pirates, but the strongest characters in all of One Piece. But wait! We're not done, because there might be more after he defeats Mihawk beyond the world's strongest swordsman, him defending the title. Now, it's been hinted throughout the series that after Luffy becomes Pirate King and whoever finds the One Piece, there will be a final war with the world government afterwards. And if that's the case, then that lines the Straw Hats fighting against the Marines and the world government themselves. So not only would Zoro be fighting one of the admirals like a Kizaru, Fujitora, or Green Bull, but even higher than that, as the real big bads of the series, the one that's been holding the world with the iron grip, the world government themselves. People like the Holy Knights. Although we don't know the full potential or the totality of their power, they could be weak as shit or absolute demons. As the Marines are just a face, it's the world government and the Celestial Dragons that are the real evil threats in the world. Not only are they the natural enemies of pirates, but also the world at large, as they're the ones behind everything, the true masterminds. Which means potentially Zoro's final opponent could be someone a part of the world government, specifically the ones heading it, the gorosei. And I'm willing to bet the gorosei that Zoro will be fighting is Ethan, the bald one, Nosujiro, that could have the Shodai Kitetsu, and if that really is it, then that means he is affiliated with Wano, possibly killing the original owner, or he was a lot nicer back in the day but turned evil now, betraying his home country. He's always seen carrying the sword and even cleaning it, showing that he truly has a connection with the blade and is a true master swordsman. So because of Zoro's affiliations and his bloodline being a Shimotsuki, it actually would make a lot of sense for him to be his final opponent. Maybe Zoro takes a Shodai Kitetsu from Ethan after their fight, or maybe just breaks it entirely, showing that just because you have a higher rank blade doesn't make you a better swordsman. I used the Sandai Kitetsu, the weakest of the 3, and brought it up with me to the very top and surpassed even you. It's not always about the sword, but also the user behind it as well. So in a sense, even though Mihawk is Zoro's main goal, he potentially won't be his final, as there's opponents beyond the world's strongest. In terms of Zoro's final bounty, well, we now know what Mihawk's is, 3,596,000,000, so I'm pretty certain Zoro's just gonna surpass that, placing him at probably about 3.6 billion. But we also don't know Silver Rayleigh's. He is the right-hand man of Roger, and even in his old age, he was able to keep up with an admiral, so at his prime, he was definitely one of the strongest to ever live, and Zoro's gonna surpass someone like this guy. And even these two share a lot of parallels, scars on their chest and their eye, the right hand of the Pirate King, or future in this case, both are swordsmen, etc. So I'm willing to bet that Zoro will also surpass him in bounty as well. Although we don't know it, I'm gonna safely say that Zoro will have a bounty of 4.5 billion highest, with the lowest probably being 3.6, surpassing Mihawk's. That might sound a little too high or crazy, but this guy's gonna be the world's strongest swordsman, surpassing all swordsmen in the world right now, including Shanks. And also he is going to be the right-hand man of the future Pirate King and have a helping hand in taking down the world government and possibly defeating one of the gorosei. Although he still has a ways to go, he's still incredibly powerful, and by the end of the series will be one of the strongest characters in history. And when it's all said and done, you will remember the name Roronoa.